I didn't expect that your dancing skills are so good. In the middle of the night, when Thor sent Peggy Carter home, Peggy suddenly sighed. Originally, she was ready to go home with a limp, but found that Thor was guiding her throughout the process. Thor laughed and said, "Why? Do you really think I'm a barbarian who only knows how to fight and kill?" Peggy smiled, patted him, and asked, "Come up for a drink?" Thor definitely would not refuse. The two entered the house. Sharon Carter had already left, and time was left for them. Oh, my God. This is too incredible. The next day, at Maya Hansen's research center, Betty Ross exclaimed instantly when she saw Maya Hansen, who was more than 10 years younger in an instant. Maya Hansen has known herself for 15 years, and she was only in her early 20s. Although she hasn't changed much now, she has matured a lot. Thor was blessed with eternal life, and suddenly returned to his previous appearance. Now believe that I didn't lie to you, right? Thor smiled at Betty. You were my magic stick all the time. Betty blushed and stopped talking, and suddenly looked at Thor expectantly. Although she is still young, for most girls, if they are over 25, they feel old. At this time, Natalia on the side suddenly said, "Hey, what is the relationship between you and Senior Carter?" Back then, when Thor first sent her to S.H.I.E.L.D., it was Peggy Carter who specially trained her. Although Peggy concealed it very well, Natalia's observation ability is inherently better than ordinary people, and she can always see some cobweb signs over the years. Moreover, Peggy's appearance obviously didn't match her age. Now that she saw Thor's miracle, she basically confirmed her guess. Thor didn't intend to hide it, and said slowly, "You guessed right. We knew each other more than half a century ago. At that time, we were still at war with Mustache." "Sure enough. Then, you shouldn't be using your real identity at the time, right? I don't believe that you will be unknown because of your character." Thor rolled his eyes. "It seems that the time we have really been together is only 2 or 3 days, right? How can you believe that you know me so well?" Natalia rolled her eyes back. "For 2 or 3 days, most of the time, I have been watching you pretending to be aggressive, and I don't understand that it is a problem of IQ." She put her chin on her cheek and thought about it. In the records, there are only a few famous people who are familiar with Peggy, excluding a few who are obviously not like Donald Blake, vice captain of the Howling Commando, the lover of Agent Carter. Betty Ross and Maya Hansen looked shocked at the same time. Although the name is not as well known as Captain America, it is not much different. Even because of his personality, he is more popular with girls. I didn't expect that the hero I always admired when I was a child actually appeared in front of me, and he once saved me from a group of gangsters. Betty Rose's eyes were already staring, and Maya Hansen was not far behind. Natalia wanted to tell them the truth. At this moment, she suddenly felt sour in her heart. "I thought I was the first person to know Thor, but I didn't expect him to be together decades ago. By the way, how is your father's research going?" Thor looked at Betty. "As usual, my father couldn't find the Hulk. He always wanted to recreate a Hulk, but he never succeeded. Although the only Bronski was successfully injected with the serum, his improvement was limited." Thor pondered for a while, and said to Maya Hansen, "Tell General Ross the position of Bruce Banner, and exchange for a super soldier serum. Although it is a defective version, I believe you can optimize it accordingly." Maya Hansen nodded and asked, "What about Extremis? Last time I sold a batch to General Ross as a research grant, and many organizations wanted to buy it, but I refused. Dilute it, sell it as a one-time healing potion, and sell it to the world." Thor is not worried about the potion being used by his enemies. The effect of Extremis is against the sky for ordinary people, but for a certain level of strong people, the effect is actually not obvious. Like Asgard people's self-recovery ability is not much worse than its effect, let alone diluted. Besides, I'm really poor, and the universe currency is not applicable on the Earth. After forming the Avengers in the future, I will be the leader, so I can't go to Stark to live there. General Ross delivered the reagents that afternoon. After so many years of failure, he no longer puts his hope in the serum. Only by finding Hulk can he find a way out through the research of successful individuals. Thor handed the serum to Maya Hansen casually, and then said a place name. At this time, Tony, who had just returned from Afghanistan, got out of the car with a plaster cast in one hand and a Big Mac in the other. An amiable big bald head rushed up, hugged him and said, "Oh, Tony, my dear son, you are so worried about me. I thought I was going to the hospital to see you. Oh, how can you eat a hamburger?" This situation is more concerned than his own son. With his support, Tony walked into the press conference venue, sat down under the podium, and opened his mouth while gnawing on a hamburger. "I haven't had time to say goodbye to my father. So, I haven't had time to ask him about many things. Ask him what he thinks about this company, whether he has had conflicts or doubts in his heart. Perhaps, he is not as we saw in the newsreels. In Afghanistan, I saw young people being killed, dying in the weapons that we designed to protect them. And I, who designed so many weapons, became part of the irresponsible. Even the logo of Stark Industries is printed on the missile that injured me. In addition to making weapons, I can use other ways to contribute to the world. So I decided to close Stark Industries' weapon sales. Everyone in the audience felt that something big was going to happen when they heard half of it, and when they heard that they would not sell weapons, they would be blown up in an instant. The reporters rushed to ask questions one by one. Obadiah went crazy on the spot. As the second shareholder, it cost him half his life. There has never been an era of peace, only a peaceful country. A voice suddenly appeared, although it was not too loud, it suppressed the noise of the scene. Thor walked in alone. Everyone looked together, including Stark. Thor continued, in many cases, peace needs war to win. Your father's purpose in making weapons was not to start war, but to fight for peace. There is no good or evil in a weapon, it is just a tool, and it is the person who wields it that determines its nature. Stark frowned slightly, intending to refute, when Thor changed the subject. Contributing to the world, your father chose his own way. This way is suitable for his philosophy. It is that era, but it may not be suitable for you. In my opinion, a true genius will not be limited by a single field. Howard's son should not follow the arranged path for the rest of his life. Even if you don't make weapons, I believe you can find your own path. When everyone was not optimistic about Stark's decision, Thor ran out to support a wave. Well said. Tony was the first to take the lead in applauding, and then asked his doubts. Sir, you seem to be very familiar with my father, but I have never met you, and you don't mind telling me your identity, right? I wonder who the hell is someone who thinks like me. Definitely want to tell you. Why don't I come here to help you pretend today? Thor snickered, and in front of all the reporters, he said loudly, I, Thor Odinson, many people don't know me. But more than 60 years ago, I had another identity, the deputy captain of the Roaring Commando, Donald Blake. The reporters were in an uproar, and after a brief silence, the sound of click, click, pictures continued, and Stark on the stage opened his mouth wide in shock. In the audience, also shocked was Phil Coulson, who came to inquire about Iron Man's secrets. Although he had known for a long time that His Royal Highness Thor's identity was unusual, he never expected that there would be such a thing. So he knew Captain America? I don't know if there is the captain's signature. You said you were. The one my father mentioned. Yes, I had a very good relationship with Mr. Howard at that time, and he even decided to let his future children call me uncle. So. His eyes signaled, you understand. Stark. Thor's attempt to identify his nephew was unsuccessful. In Stark's eyes, the person in front of him seemed to be a relative who came here to make connections when he was developed. And he didn't find a good excuse. Looking younger than him at this age, the credibility of Howard's illegitimate child can be higher. You bastard. You're going to cause trouble for me once you come back. In S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury's office, the Black Stew complained angrily, do you know that you are almost overshadowing Stark in the limelight now? A legendary figure decades ago suddenly appeared. And, Peggy Carter, one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., spoke out to prove his authenticity. Calm down. When Tony Stark comes back from Afghanistan, all kinds of incredible things will happen more and more, people will get used to it soon. Nick Fury was taken aback, and immediately thought of something. You mean, more superpowers will appear? My plan can start? Thor nodded. People from the military left in a hurry this afternoon, do you know the reason? Hulk. They must have found Hulk. Potato stood up and asked, what are we going to do now? Thor waved him to sit down and said, don't do anything, he can't catch Hulk. Even if you recruit the Hulk now, the military won't let it go. Only when they understand that they can't control this, you have a chance. Nick Fury nodded. Understood. How can I explain to the public that you announced your identity? No need to explain anything, they won't take long to get used to. Anyway, there will be more other antiques appearing soon. Steve Rogers? Just one of them. In a slum somewhere in Brazil, a shirtless middle-aged man is sitting cross-legged in meditation. It has been more than half a year since his last transformation, and this is the longest time he has been peaceful. Over the years, while hiding, he searched for various ways to calm himself down. Wow. Woof, woof. A dog barked. In this slum, dog barking in the middle of the night was common and no one took it seriously, but Bruce Banner was still alert. He walked quietly to the window, opened a crack, and glanced outside. There was silence and nothing happened. However, the vigilance he developed after years of fleeing made him decide to transfer first. After observing for a while to confirm that there was no one there, he made a human silhouette on the bed, lowered a rope from the window, and slowly climbed down. Sure enough, as soon as he went there, he felt something was wrong. It was too quiet, so he patted his hands and feet and walked towards the suburbs. What a surprise! A joking voice sounded, and a heavily armed officer appeared in front of him. With a wave of his hand, a team of special forces surrounded him, aiming an anesthesia gun at him. Bruce Banner, escaped from the military laboratory 5 years ago. I didn't expect a great scientist with great prospects to come to this kind of place to retire. I'm sorry, your leisurely life is over. Bronsky sneered. Banner raised his hands and said with a helpless smile, if I were you, I would put down the gun. Trust me, don't force me, injured by loss of control. It's a pity that Bronsky ignored his kindness, and said lightly, if you have anything to say, let's save it and tell General Ross. He said with a wave of his hand, catch the alive. Feeling the anesthesia gun hit his body, Bruce Banner's heart sank. The next moment, these soldiers saw the most terrifying scene in their lives. Early in the morning, General Ross hurried over and knocked on the door. Not far from the research center, a manor was built, which was built together with the research center a few years ago. Usually Maya Hansen and Betty Rose live there, and sometimes Natalia will come. After Thor came back, this became his new residence. General Ross came in person. He gave Betty Ross a complicated look, and then went straight to the point. Hulk ran away and injured many soldiers, including Bronsky. Thor sneered. Bronsky is a muscular idiot who only complicates simple things. Ross said in a deep voice, I'm here to talk about the Hulk. Thor didn't continue to entangle. After all, the future abomination is Hulk's experience package. Our deal is just to tell you the location of Hulk, not to guarantee you catch him. I don't know where I will go if I run away now. However, it's Banner, if I don't like Hulk, I will definitely find some well-known biologists and try to eliminate Hulk's genes. He will come to you. No, it's not like he didn't know that there was a deal between us, so how could he fall into the trap? There are only a few people with the ability to design genetic engineering, so it shouldn't be too difficult to send people to pay attention to them all, right? General Ross understood what he meant, greeted Betty, got up and left, and Thor's voice came from behind him. Don't have too much hope. Even if you catch Hulk, it doesn't mean you can replicate his situation. Hulk is very possibly the only one, like Captain America. Rose paused and didn't answer. Thor was right, because of the guilt of hurting others. Banner finally decided to find Mr. Lan and help him remove the Hulk gene from his body. He found Mr. Lan and received treatment. If there is no next thing, it may be successful. However, just as he walked out of the laboratory, he was arrested by General Ross. He warned viciously, if you dare to make Hulk disappear, then prepare to spend a lifetime in prison. Banner didn't refute. In fact, he was already mentally prepared. The reason why he kept running away before was just because he was afraid of hurting other people. A distraught General Ross took Banner to the helicopter. He didn't notice that Bronsky wasn't following. Seeing the power of the Hulk, he began to desire it. He walked into Mr. Lan's laboratory. Contact Maya Hansen's research center and ask them if there is a way to restore the wiped Hulk gene. General Ross ordered. As soon as I finished speaking, I suddenly received a report from the soldiers. Report to the general, Hulk is wreaking havoc on the street and needs support. General Ross was stunned. He glanced at Banner on the opposite side and ordered, give me the video. The video was switched on immediately, and what appeared in front of General Ross and Bruce Banner was a shit yellow monster, abomination. Ha 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 ha. This is power. Intoxicating power. Ha ha ha. The abomination laughed wildly and lifted a car and smashed it into the crowd. 2 soldiers took out the rocket launchers from the car and blasted at it, but were caught by one hand, unscathed. The terrified soldiers hurriedly drove away, but were blocked by hatred, desperately watching a car getting closer and closer in sight. Give me something real. On the helicopter, General Ross and Banner stared blankly at the screen going black. Order to bring all the troops here. General Ross ordered helplessly. He finally understood what Thor said, but it was too late. No, Banner said, ordinary troops will die against him, because I have felt the power. Let me go. Ross turned back and said in a low voice, do you know what you're doing? Banner nodded. We created this thing, and we should bear it all. General Ross hesitated for a moment, then fixedly glanced at him, and said, landed near it. No, open the rear hatch and I'll jump in. Trash. They are all trash, give me a stronger opponent. On the street, Hatred is still raging, destroying everything in sight. A messy street, full of chaos and death, people seem to have come to the Middle East. On the other side of the street, a figure fell from the sky and fell heavily on the ground, creating a deep hole. A few seconds later, a huge green fist rushed out of the deep pit to the ground. Hulk, strike. In midair, Thor looked at this scene and laughed dumbfoundedly. Banner, you are too unkind. When you are free, you always treat Hulk as a monster and try to eliminate him. But when something happens, you want to use Hulk's power to wipe your ass. No wonder Hulk didn't get along with you later. Moreover, you are not afraid that your transformation method that fell from the sky will fail if you use it too much. Below, Hulk, who got out of the deep hole, tore off his bursting top, posed for a pose, and roared, almost overwhelming the noise of the street. The abomination a few kilometers away recognized Hulk's voice, and he grinned. Hulk, yay. In the ruins, two giant runners were getting closer and closer, and then they collided fiercely, sending out a huge shockwave that even overturned several surrounding cars. The Hulk flew upside down and hit a newsstand before he managed to stabilize himself. He slapped a car, ripping it in half, and then with half the car in each hand, he charged at the abomination, knocking the abomination down with a sledgehammer. He took advantage of the momentum to pursue, raised the huge car and smashed it towards the abomination. If it is Hulk in normal state, it will not take much effort to deal with such a defective product. Now, however, thanks to Dr. Blue's treatment, most of the Hulk's cells have been killed, and if it wasn't for the thrill of falling from a height, Hulk might have been wiped out. Arguably, Hulk right now, out of his weakest moment. And Hate, unlike Hulk's shirtless, has a lot of bone spurs all over his body, and a row of hard spikes on his back. Moreover, Bronski obviously injected Extremis, and now the recovery ability of the abomination is much stronger than the original. After being attacked a few times, Hate gritted his teeth and sneered, "That's all you need." Hulk kicked his right leg hard, and Hulk flew hundreds of meters instantly. The furious Hulk charged again, but unfortunately the current abomination surpassed him in terms of speed, agility and strength. Within a few rounds, he was firmly suppressed. Hate punched Hulk away, then quickly stepped forward, stepped on it, and grinned, "You're too weak, you don't deserve this kind of power." Hulk roared angrily, he grabbed the fallen egg lamppost and slammed it on the Temple of Abomination. Thor watched the battle below, and suddenly remembered something. In the original book, the main reason why Hulk turned defeat into victory and defeated the abomination with a weak body was the setting that the angrier Hulk became stronger, and Betty Ross was a key factor. Now, the Hulk simply can't amass enough rage without Betty Ross. The phone rang, and Peggy Carter called. "Aren't you going to make a move?" Peggy Carter asked. Having seen Thor kill the supergiant, she believed in Thor's strength very much. "Wait a minute, I want to see Hulk's potential." "It's up to you. I will first notify people to treat the wounded and evacuate the people." The battle on the ground has come to an end. Although Hulk has exploded many times, it is still difficult to defeat the abomination. And because of his weakness, his transformation was almost difficult to maintain. Hate grabbed Hulk and pinned him hard to the ground. Hulk growled angrily, but couldn't break free. Weakness. Hate cursed, then raised his head to the sky and roared. Suddenly, he looked in one direction, which was the direction of the Maya Hansen Research Center. While running in that direction, he said to himself, "If I can grab more Extremis, I will become stronger." "You have no chance." A golden circle appeared in front of the hatred. He subconsciously stopped, looked at Thor who walked out, and roared, "Little ants, I have no time to waste with you." He punched Thor hard. Thor dodged sideways, and then punched Hate's shoulder joint hard. With a muffled groan, Hate clutched his shoulders and took a few steps back, with some surprise in his eyes. This seemingly short ordinary man actually far surpassed Hulk in one punch. Unwilling to admit defeat, he roared and punched again. It has to be said that Bronski's fighting technique is at a very good level among humans, and becoming an abomination inherits this. In this respect, it is much better than Hulk, who can only open and close. However, in front of Thor, who has thousands of years of combat experience, his movements were still very rough. Thor flashed several times, and punched the hateful face violently. The abomination flew upside down, but before it could fly out, Thor grabbed an arm and rolled it up, smashing it hard to the ground. The ensuing battle was even more tragic, but this tragic word was only for hatred. Thor snapped off Hatred's wrist, then kicked him in the face, forcing him to his knees. The loathing roared and raised the bone spur on his elbow to stab at Thor's face. When he was grasped, the whole bone spur was pulled out with a click, and his arm shrugged and pulled down. High in the sky, a drone is filming all this. Oh my god! Sharon Carter exclaimed, and the other agents were also shocked. Thor's figure is considered tall compared to ordinary people, but in front of the abomination several meters tall, he is like a cat and a mouse, but now the mouse can't take care of the cat. This kind of power must be controlled, an official who looked upright said. One abomination is enough to make us lose New York, and this guy who calls himself Thor is obviously stronger than the abomination. If it is not controlled, it will become a disaster for all mankind, another bald head said. Natalia sneered and said, "Good idea, Agent Sitwell, you should go and talk to him about the recruitment issue in person. The premise is that the other party doesn't treat you as an idiot." Sitwell said with a dark face. This guy named Thor lives in a manor near the Maya Hansen Research Center. The government can arrange personnel to supervise and protect it. It is said to be protection, but it is actually using family members as a threat. There are no fools present. Sharon Carter said. The other party is Captain Black. If you want to supervise, do you need to supervise my aunt? Everyone can hear the irony in her tone. The two sides argued, and what Natalia and Sharon Carter didn't expect was that most people actually supported Sitwell's proposal. They knew that the purpose of these people could not really be to protect civilians, thinking that this method might arouse the other party's anger instead. The world of politicians has never been so dirty. An interesting phenomenon, those who stand on Natalia's side are usually all over the world doing practical things, Barden agent, Maria Hill agent. Those who support Sitwell are mostly responsible for drinking tea and reading newspapers, and they just talk about things. Enough. Nick Fury slapped the table. There is no law that allows us to treat a historical hero with no criminal record as a terrorist. Don't mention this matter again. Nick Fury thinks more than anyone else. If Sitwell's plan is followed, almost every Avenger in the future will be supervised and reduced to a weapon in private hands. Moreover, he was quite sure that Thor would never agree, nor would Asgard accept their future king as a tool of politicians. He definitely didn't want the Avengers to die before it even started. In the video, the battle has come to an end, lying on the ground like a dead dog, twitching slightly. Thor suddenly looked up and looked at the drone high in the sky. Everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. only saw a flash of lightning strike, and then the screen went black. He figured it out a long time ago, but he didn't pay attention to it at all, Hawkeye Barden said. Sitwell and the others turned pale for a while. In their view, this is a warning. Nick Fury glanced at the pale faces, and there was a flash of determination in his eyes. Absolutely not let these people meddle in superhero affairs, otherwise it will only push all superheroes to the opposite side. Others don't know, but he knows that Thor's strength is far more than what he showed. If he is really in a hurry, I am afraid that only by contacting Carol with that communication device can he be stopped. And this kind of thing, Carol may not be on the side of S.H.I.E.L.D. Thor dragged his unconscious abomination, and walked towards the dazed Hulk. Just now, when he beat the abomination violently, Hulk had already arrived, but he didn't intervene. First meeting, I'm Thor Odinson, he held out his hand. Although Hulk has the same mentality as a child, he still knows the etiquette of shaking hands. He shook hands with Thor with his big fan-like hand, and said inarticulately, Hulk. It doesn't look violent at all, maybe it was scared by seeing Thor's ferocity? Many people think that Hulk is fearless. In fact, Hulk, who is a child, is afraid when he sees a more violent existence than himself, especially physical blows to the flesh. I basically understand your situation. On the one hand, you and Banner are the same person, but at the same time have different ideas. But in any case, you are closely related and should accept each other. Therefore, you should communicate with Banner normally. After all, Banner is a weak coward, strong Hulk always bullies him, he's going to hide from Hulk. Hulk was impatient to hear the previous words, but the last sentence made him very satisfied. He stomped his feet and said, Banner, weak, Hulk, strong. After speaking, his body suddenly began to shrink, and soon turned into a Banner in shorts. Who I am? Where am I? Banner regained consciousness in a daze. He felt very strange. In the past, Hulk would exhaust his physical strength to transform back, but this time he took the initiative to return his body to him. He looked around and saw Thor. I convinced Hulk to go back, came Thor's voice. Are you kidding me? No one can communicate with the Hulk. Thor patted him on the shoulder with a faint smile. Hate can talk. Why can't Hulk? You and Hulk are destined to be entangled, and blindly treating him as a virus or a monster will only make the differences between the two of you bigger and bigger. Banner argued. But Hulk was always very violent, he caused so much damage and hurt a lot of people. Actually, Hulk has never hurt you. Even this time, compared to the abomination that wreaks havoc, although Hulk still has difficulty controlling his own power, at least he won't intentionally destroy. He glanced at Banner, who didn't care, and continued, Hulk is a knife. What you have to do is not to escape and fear, but to find a way to accept him, not to mention controlling this knife, at least let it be used as much as possible, where it should be used. Although what you said makes sense, I can choose not to use a knife. Violence can't solve problems in many cases. Banner still shook his head. It has to be said that he is a kind-hearted old man, the kind who is least used to using violence to solve problems. Such a person has become the most violent superhero Hulk. He can and wants to rely on his brain to solve problems, but he has to rely on powerful force to exercise violence. It has to be said that fate is impermanent. This kind of feeling is probably like writing homework for a summer vacation after a lot of hard work. When the school starts, the teacher tells you that there are answers later, and the homework does not count. At that time, maybe you can't help it. Just like this time, you finally chose to use violence. Thor didn't bother to argue with Banner at this time. In the future, he will have to use the power of the Hulk again, and then he will understand. Regardless, Thor doesn't want them to end up as Dr. Hulk. It seems to have completely controlled Hulk, but without the angry Hulk, how much strength can he exert? Besides, Banner's combat ability is hard to describe, and anti-Hulk armor is useless for him. Bruce Banner finally chose to escape. He left the United States. He's not ready to be a superhero yet. Hey, congratulations on triggering the Hulk-related task. Invincible Hulk, you will be rewarded for completing the task. Mission objective. Help Banner and Hulk accept each other and become a truly invincible Hulk. Mission reward. Random skill book draw coupon. The voice of the system recalled. Random skill book. It sounds like a high value, but unfortunately this task is quite difficult, and it will not be completed for a while. You know, many people in the bureau have proposed to supervise you. On the sofa, Natalia leaned lazily beside Thor and said. On one side, Peggy Carter sat on the sofa and watched him. It's rare that a few people are free today, so we came to the manor to have a good get-together. It's just a bunch of idiots playing with political struggles. What do? But these idiots make up the majority. Peggy Carter said worriedly, there is always a feeling that S.H.I.E.L.D. has changed. Is that why you asked me to leave early? Thor nodded. Yes, most of the current S.H.I.E.L.D. executives, except for a few like Nick Fury, have been corrupted by money and power. But don't worry, I can't make waves. Throw them down, and they won't be able to go to work tomorrow with their hands on their buttocks. The girls sprayed wine together, and Peggy Carter pinched him severely, and said angrily, your mouth is really hopeless, can't you be more civilized? It's not too much to say that you are an uncivilized barbarian. Natalia interrupted suddenly. By the way, Thor, your Mjolnir has been lying in New Mexico for 10 years. It's almost rusted. You don't plan to take it back? She was discouraged. I went there once, but found that I can't lift it anymore. Thor shook his head. My father exiled me back then because my ideas conflicted with him. Before I truly accepted his ideas, I couldn't exert its power even if I forcibly lifted them. Although he has already stopped interfering with my actions, but the curse has not been removed. In this world, there may only be 2 people left who can lift it. Who? One is Captain America, Steve Rogers. The other is an astronomer. Natalia said narrowly, I guess it's a woman. Otherwise you would have said the name directly. Thor has black lines all over his head. Women are too smart to be annoying. However, he thought of one thing, he lacked a handy weapon. Although Mjolnir is powerful, its main function is to help him control his power. In fact, after he is awakened, the help of the hammer is minimal, so he has not considered lifting the curse for so many years. The artifact that really belongs to Thor is the Stormbreaker. To forge Stormbreaker, you need to go to Nadavi, the kingdom of Dwarf, which belongs to one of the 9 realms, and it is not difficult to find. However, there was another important problem, he couldn't find Groot. At this time, the Galactic Dance Troupe has not yet been established. Star-Lord Gamora is still wandering around with his godfather, Rocket and Groot are relying on each other. Mantis Girl is still working as a hypnotic ability master, and Drax the Destroyer is still picking up soap in prison. Almost have to wait until after the Ultron incident. Go to Xandar Star and wait for a rabbit to meet them. It's okay. At this stage, Ancient One and Odin are both there, and the Earth is still in the novice protection period. Most of the enemies that can be encountered are not very threatening, and it doesn't matter if they don't use weapons. What are you thinking? Maya Hansen brought a plate of fruit, fed a piece to Thor, and said excitedly, "The super soldier serum you gave me has been analyzed successfully. Although it has not been optimized, it has already got a clue." Thor rubbed her head and said with a smile, "Don't worry, a live mouse will come back in a short time. With my relationship with him, it's no problem to ask for a blood sample." As Natalia said, S.H.I.E.L.D. recently discovered a wreckage of a plane that crashed in the last century in the Arctic Circle, and it is being excavated. Captain America is coming back. In the evening, Thor accompanied Peggy Carter and the others in the yard looking at the night sky. A crimson figure streaked across the sky like a shooting star. "What's that?" Peggy Carter asked. "A new superhero. Unlike Steve, this is a pure mortal, assembled by technology, comparable to a god." "Tony Stark?" Natalia guessed right away. She knew about Stark's armor made in Afghanistan. Thor nodded and jokingly said, "He has finally taken this step. Maybe soon, the stock of Stark Industries will rise again. If you want to make a fortune, you can invest in it." Although Tony Stark has awakened from being a playboy, his pretentious nature will not change, and he will definitely admit his identity. Stark was in a bad mood. In today's news, a warlord is massacring civilians. And what can make this warlord rise is the official Stark Industry weapon. He was very guilty and decided to redeem the mistake himself. A warlord's stronghold was wiped out, and weapons were destroyed one after another. Even the earliest Iron Man armor is still not something that conventional weapons can resist. After finishing all this easily, when Tony returned, he was targeted by 2 fighter planes. Looking at the fighter plane that was chasing after him, Tony looked helpless. During the entanglement, he accidentally crashed a fighter plane, but he saved the flight member. This incident also made Iron Man famous. What Tony didn't expect was that this incident stimulated Obadiah and made him decide to put all his eggs in one basket. In the mansion, Obadiah attacked Tony, paralyzed him, and took the reactor. Seeing Tony's face turn blue, Obadiah smiled smugly. He taunted Tony frantically, and then left him to die. It's a pity that he endured it for 30 years, but underestimated Stark's desire to survive at the last moment. After a short period of paralysis, Stark struggled to climb to the table, picked up the first-generation reactor that had been eliminated, and placed it on his chest. When Stark in armor arrived, the Iron King driven by Obadiah stood directly opposite. 2 Iron Warriors engage in a duel. In terms of strength, Stark's Mark III is no less than Iron King, but the problem is that even the best car has to burn oil. After Bayububu fired a few laser cannons, Jarvis frantically called the police, making Tony realize that he can't fight like this, he can only try to fight with the opponent. However, heavy mechs like the Iron Overlord originally valued strength, and Mark III became a humanoid sandbag and was punched and kicked. With the energy alarm of Jarvis inside and the brutal ravages of the Iron King outside, Tony finally thought of a way. He rushed to the sky at full speed, and the Iron King chased after him. With 5% of the energy left, the Iron King grabbed Stark's feet and pulled him off. Obadiah's bitter voice came out. "I am better and stronger than you. You accept your fate." Stark replied lightly, "Then how did you solve the freezing problem?" Obadiah was taken aback for a moment, and then the screen in front of him went black. Stark smiled triumphantly. "Let me check it for you." He lightly punched the Iron King on the head, breaking a piece of ice, and the Iron King fell quickly. Since ancient times, the villain died of talking too much, and the decent died of being cheap. Because a piece of ice was missing from his head, the circuit recovery of the Iron Overlord was a little bit faster, and he recovered a second before he fell to the ground. Stark, who had almost run out of energy and fell to the ground, stared blankly at the Iron Overlord who stood up again. His energy was only 2% left, and he couldn't last a round. Obadiah laughed wildly. "Hey, Tony, is there another way? If not, go to hell." He was not in a hurry to deal with Stark, but to let him taste the despair so that he could pay back his 30 years repressed. For a moment, Tony was really desperate. He was out of options. However, the next moment, he made an unexpected move. At the last moment, Stark unleashed his last energies and charged in the direction of Thor's manor, with a loud cry that resounded through the heavens and the earth. "Uncle, help me." Thor, who had heard the movement a long time ago and rushed over to observe secretly, was full of black lines on his forehead. After Natalia knew the situation here, she called a team of agents, and she heard it now. "Didn't expect you to be such an Iron Man." In fact, when a bigwig like Peggy Carter stepped forward to confirm Thor's identity, Stark basically believed what he said that day. And a few days ago, through his good friend Rhodes, Stark got the information that Thor hanged the abomination, so in his opinion, It is no problem to deal with an iron overlord. The most important thing is that it is about your life, so lose face if you lose face. Obadiah was not in a hurry to take Tony's life. He was like a cat playing with a mouse, keeping a distance and chasing all the way. Before he knew it, he crossed a red line. Tony Stark was running with all his strength. His energy was basically exhausted. He could only use it to maintain his life, and now he was running wildly, dragging his heavy armor purely by physical strength. At this moment, I suddenly felt a figure passing by my side quickly, and then there was a huge amounts of roar behind me. Bang! Before the Iron Overlord could react, a strong blow hit his chest, and he flew backwards, leaving a black hole in his chest. Obadiah looked at the blond young man in front of him, roared, and raised his iron fist as big as a water tank to strike. The punch was powerful enough to crush a tank. Tony clutched his chest and hid in the corner, watching this scene, complaining. A soil beetle is a soil beetle. As soon as he has strength, he thinks he is a god. He could clearly see the power of that kick just now and the destructive power it caused, but Obadiah still tried to go head to head with the opponent. Sure enough, Thor blocked the iron fist of the Iron Overlord with one hand, pulled back, and then flew up and stepped heavily on the shoulder. With a click, an arm fell off. If it was an exoskeleton armor like Iron Man, this one would be enough to make Obadiah roll on the ground in pain. But the Iron Overlord is a pure robot, and the controller hides in a relatively safe place inside to control everything. Even so, Obadiah was still terrified. He hurriedly raised his other hand, and the heavy artillery was about to be fired. "Be careful," exclaimed Tony, who was hiding in the dark and observing. King World War II hero, die to me. Obadiah grinned and pressed the launch button. A missile whizzed towards him, and Thor Thunderbolt wrapped his arm and blasted it with a punch. Huge amounts of the explosion left him unscathed. The terrified Obadiah wanted to continue to attack, but Thor's lightning was faster than him, and the electric current from his fingertips shot at the launcher like a six-veined sword, destroying it instantly. While he was still in a daze, Thor sprinted to his side, grabbed a piece of breastplate and pulled it hard, and a steel plate was torn off. Without giving him time to react, he attacked with both hands left and right, and the steel plates were removed one by one. Tony was completely shocked. Although he knew that this uncle was very fierce, he didn't expect to be so fierce. He was like a humanoid Hulk. No, Hulk isn't as brutal as he is. Obadiah was already scared to pee, and there was a strange smell inside the closed Iron Tyrant, but he didn't care about these, and was about to run away immediately. But he couldn't get rid of Thor hanging on him, like a lion hanging on a wildebeest, and kept bleeding him. As a huge amount of electric current came, all the circuits of the Iron King were overloaded for an instant, and then went out, and Tony thought he was paralyzed by rolling around. "No, it's impossible, it's impossible. Let me go, please let me go, I'll give you all my shares," he yelled in horror, but he couldn't move, and watched Thor helplessly. Lifting off the last steel plate, he was pulled out and thrown to Tony's side. "Fool, after tonight, do you still have fart shares? Nephew, I leave it to you. Definitely, if you don't have the heart to do it, I can help you. Learn about Yang's electrotherapy." Thor held out his hand, and a small arc flickered at his fingertips. "Tony, you won. But don't get too complacent. I won't die. I will go to jail at most. Just wait. I will definitely come back." All of a sudden, she roared wildly. Thor sneered. What an idiot, no wonder he can only be a grandson for so many years. Looking at Stark, he gave him a look. Stark looked at the old man who had been in the company for more than 30 years with a complicated face, and hesitation said, "He is powerless to resist now, we should hand him over to the law." Thor interrupted before he finished speaking. "You are also an idiot, no wonder you have been buried in the drum for so many years. Use your 500-point IQ brain to think about it. With his identity, the probability of death penalty is almost zero. This guy holds a lot of secrets of the Stark industry. Even if he is sentenced to life imprisonment, a lot of people will want to get him out." Tony's face paled. He definitely knew this, but he was still a little unwilling to accept the reality when it came to the end. Thor made up the knife. "It's okay to let him go. Let him sell more weapons to the warlords in the Middle East. Maybe he can get a few more Ethans." Thinking of Ethan's sacrifice, Stark felt uncomfortable again, and he nodded slowly, making up his mind. Tony finally pulled out his pistol and gave Obadiah a kick. Seeing that he was depressed, Thor didn't bother him anymore and left alone. When Obadiah's cause of death was finally announced, it became a plane crash. The truth cannot be disclosed. If the public knows that Obadiah, the second in command of Stark Industry, secretly has affairs with terrorists and provides a lot of weapons, Not only Stark Industries' reputation will be bad, but the government's international reputation will also be great. Fall. Although the original reputation is not very good. At the press conference, Tony was reading out the manuscript that Rhodes handed over, but a beautiful reporter interrupted him. Facing the reporter's doubts, he replied, "I'm not a hero. Obviously I have too many character flaws. I have done too many wrong things, and the influence is very bad." Rhodes leaned over and reminded, "Just read it according to the script." Tony nodded, glanced at the manuscript, then raised his head, and said slowly, "Actually, I am Iron Man." Facing Tony's change of mind, Rhodes helplessly covered his face. After dealing with the crazy reporters, Stark returned to the backstage. Thor was looking at him with a smile on his face, and teased, "Should I call you nephew now, or Iron Man?" Stark looked gloomy. The good mood he had just skinned was gone. He would rather face those reporters than face this elder who likes to oppress him with seniority. "What are you doing here?" Tony asked with a dark face. "It's not a big deal. I saved your life last night and left without calling uncle. Come on, hurry up." Tony's face darkened even more. "I don't think you'd be so bored. Tell me, what's the matter?" He forced the topic back. Only then did Thor put away his smile, and said seriously, "Battle armor, in a sense, is also a weapon. If it is spread, the consequences will be more terrible than guns and missiles. So, you have to be aware of it, and don't make the same mistakes." Tony said sternly, "Don't worry, I will refuse. Stark Industries will transform into other industries, and iron armor is just my personal hobby, and I will not commercialize it. Remember what you said. The birth of Iron Man is a big event, marking the birth of this new era. From then on, people gradually got used to the existence of superhero. In the next few years, the crisis that the Earth will encounter will surpass that of the past few thousand years, and many superhuman beings who might have been unknown will stand up. This is the reason why heroes emerge from troubled times." However, in Thor's view, there are not too many superheroes. Although there are only a few top heroes who are qualified to face Thanos in the future, Thanos' huge army needs a large number of ordinary heroes to fight against. Otherwise, the vast majority of strong men could be overwhelmed by the crowd tactics of purple sweet potato essence alone. So, the next thing you can do is New Mexico, Thor theme park. This place was originally a wasteland, but since a hammer fell from the sky 10 years ago, the surrounding area has become lively. Many tourists come here especially for the name, trying to lift the hammer, but they can't do it. Some old man named Stan Lee couldn't even tow it with a car. Later, the old man Stan Lee, who was not short of money, invested in the establishment of a park, which has developed to this day and is already a famous local scenic spot. Today, the scenic spot has 3 special guests. A girl walking in front had some black hair and a very pretty face. In her eyes, there is a light of wisdom, and at the same time, there is an elf-like playfulness. Obviously she can rely on her face for food, but she chooses to work hard, and she is talking about her type. Behind her was a long-haired girl with slightly lower appearance than her, and an old man. When they walked through the gate, Thor, who was holding a newspaper on a bench, looked over consciously. She recognized the girl at first sight, even though she had never seen it or investigated it. Jane Foster, originally his girlfriend in history, a female Thor in some parallel worlds. "There's nothing interesting in this park, Jane. You are so crazy to come all the way," Daisy behind Jane Foster complained. "I didn't come here for fun. According to the information I have learned, this hammer is of great help to my research." Okay, I know you have a soft spot for your boyfriend's hammer," Daisy complained. Jane Foster's face was slightly red, and she immediately returned to normal. "Shut up. How many times have I said, I don't have a boyfriend?" "That's right. Your boyfriend's name is Blake, right? I've seen you have a men's suit with his name on it. But it was confirmed a while ago that Blake is Thor." Daisy stole laughing and exposing her shortcomings. Jane Foster looked helpless. When she was young, she was in the 2nd grade of middle school and followed her classmates to chase stars. But as a straight girl of steel, she doesn't know a few celebrities at all, except for the well-known Captain America and Captain Black. That dress was bought at that time, with the name, Donald Blake, written on it, and it has never been lost. Daisy saw the cleaning of the room one time. As a characteristic activity of a place, lifting the hammer is a must for tourists who come here, and the 3 of Jane Foster will naturally not miss it. At the gate of the park, Thor was not in a hurry to go in. He waited calmly. If his guess is correct, there will be a result soon. Suddenly, a huge wave of energy spread. A vortex appeared in the sky, a tornado formed instantly, and dazzling lightning flashed in it. The entire sky darkened, like a total solar eclipse. The circuit equipment in the park screamed, and then burned instantly. Many people panicked. Only Thor had a smile on his face. I have been waiting for you for a long time, Kamui Thor. Oh, Jane, what did you do? Daisy exclaimed. I don't know, I just raised the hammer lightly. You. Put it down first. Okay. Jane Foster panicked. She hurriedly put down the hammer, but found that the hammer was tightly attached to her hand, and she couldn't let go. Don't let it go, calm down, from now on, it belongs to you. The sudden sound startled several people, and when they looked back, it was a young man in black with sunglasses, wearing casual clothes, and holding a bottle of water in his hand. You or Thor? Jane asked uncertainly. A little embarrassed, still holding a hammer that belonged to others in his hand. It feels like stealing something and meeting the right owner. Thor didn't answer, and said to himself, only those who are qualified can lift Mjolnir and master the power of Thor. This hammer has been with me for thousands of years, but it has never been as happy as it is today. Because, you are its real master. This is different from Natalia. When Natalia raised the hammer, she was only recognized for her own qualities, allowing her to borrow Mjolnir's power, including Captain America. And now, Thor can clearly feel that the power of thunder is slowly transforming Jane Foster's physique, making her the real Thor. In fact, Jane Foster also felt the difference in her body, and the panic just now made her unaware of it. Now, after calming down, I feel that the exhaustion in my body has been swept away, and I have never felt so relaxed before. This hammer seems to have become a part of the body. Daisy on the side was stunned. She yelled, wow, he said he wasn't your boyfriend, and gave you such a precious gift when we first met. A look of embarrassment appeared on Miss Jien's face. She blushed and said, well, let's say it first, I won't sleep with you. She knows that many playboys are very generous to girls, because they want to get both money and man. And Thor's reputation in this regard is better than that of the old scumbag Stark. PFF'd. Thor spit out in one gulp, never expecting such a vulgar word from this pretty-looking little girl. Isn't it good to be a quiet and beautiful girl? It's no wonder that he is obviously an excellent astronomer, but he is still so bad after so many years. It stands to reason that someone will sponsor him, right? It is estimated that those who want to invest will be bullied by Ms. Jien's words. If they are honest and gentlemen, 80% of the sponsorship will be pornographic. After all, no one wants to be mistaken for bad intentions. Definitely there are dudes with ulterior motives, but Miss Jane is the one who slapped Thor Loki. Daisy and Dr. Eric were also speechless. Jane also realized that she was rude, and she hurriedly said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Thor waved his hand helplessly. It's okay, I don't mind. Besides, you guessed right, I really have this idea. Miss Jien was stunned. I can't answer this. It's also thanks to her good impression of Thor, or else she might have made a big mouth. She could only change the subject bluntly. Well, Mr. Thor, why are you here? Are you waiting for me here on purpose? I have to say, Jane Foster is very smart. She quickly guessed that it was impossible for Thor to come here by such a coincidence, and she might have followed her early in the morning. Definitely not. I just sensed Mjolnir's joyful mood when he met his new owner, so I came here to take a look. Thor definitely wouldn't admit it. He swiped his finger, and a golden circle appeared in front of him. The scene inside it is the busy New York. Here, look, I can go back and forth between New York and New Mexico in the blink of an eye. Miss Jane didn't doubt it, because her attention had already been attracted by another matter. Oh. My God, this is space science. Space teleportation, it really exists. So there really is a legendary magician, Jane exclaimed excitedly. Should it be said that he is worthy of being a top student? The point of view is different. Now that I'm pretending to be aggressive, I don't mind pretending to be a bigger one. It feels good to be admired by beautiful women. Not only does space teleportation exist, even time travel is not impossible. I am the Captain Black back then, you know. Many people think that I disappeared for half a century after World War II. In fact, I did not disappear. It should be said originally it's me in the 21st century who traveled back. Thor's words deepened the frenzy in Miss Jane's eyes, as if she was looking at a perfect mouse. I know. Daisy shouted excitedly. Jane admires Captain Black the most, and she even told me that this is her ex-boyfriend. Thor froze for a moment, at thought of this level. In the movie, Jane Foster claims to have a doctor's ex-boyfriend named Donald Blake, and the doctor in the comics is transformed by Thor, who was demoted to the Earth. Unexpectedly, in this world, going around is still me. No, no, no. I didn't, it wasn't me. Jane became nervous in an instant, and she was incoherent. Not only Daisy this time, but Thor also felt it, so nervous to deny it, the explanation is to cover up. Okay. I temporarily accept the new Thor setting you gave me, but can I ask why? You know, I prefer astronomy, and I'm just curious about magic, energy, etc. After calming down, Jane Foster asked Thor in doubt. Because this world needs you. Over the past few years, more and more superpowers have appeared, and they were born to deal with the crisis in the future. The Earth is not as ordinary as it seems on the surface. In a sense, it is even part of the universe. Center, bear the brunt of the crisis. As the inheritor of Thor's power, you can choose to give up here, or you can use this power to help others. Although the current Earth is unknown, even Midgard has to be added in the universe before anyone has heard of it. But the Earth is not ordinary. It can give birth to the top powerhouse in the universe, the Ancient One. It was protected by the goddess Black Panther hundreds of thousands of years ago. Almost all the strongest Avengers were born on the Earth, including Thanos. The road of tyranny also ended on the Earth. A strong man in another parallel world said that if he had not been sealed many years ago, today's Earth would be the center of the universe. I understand, Miss Jane said seriously, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. Am I right? Right or wrong? Thor added. This sentence is used as a restraint for the strong to their own behavior, not a moral kidnapping by the weak for the strong. Thor patted her on the shoulder and said earnestly, in the future, many people will try to kidnap us morally. You must be prepared. Jane Foster finally followed Thor with a hammer and returned to the manor. Although she raised the hammer, she was not originally proficient in various fighting techniques like Captain America or Natalia. She also needed Thor's guidance to teach her how to use this power. This is space teleportation. Wow, there is no discomfort at all. It stands to reason that a sudden change in space makes it easy for mammals to feel dizzy and vomit. As soon as she stepped out of the portal, Jane Foster exclaimed, and quickly turned on the madman mode after a few words. Thor was speechless. No wonder the two would break up in the original book, a straight man of steel and a straight woman of steel, separation and reunion is the norm. Jane Foster stayed in the manor. Maya Hansen and Betty Rose were a little surprised by her arrival, but they didn't say anything. During the day, Miss Jane followed Thor to learn the control of power, and at night, she read some astronomy classics brought from Asgard in the room. These scientific knowledge far beyond the Earth have refreshed her worldview. As a result, on the third day, Miss Jane strongly demanded to move out. Because it was not at night, it was too noisy. Make her wear dark circles every morning. Thor said he couldn't help it, young man, very angry. In her spare time, Natalia will come to practice fighting skills with Thor. Thor will suppress his own strength and fight her purely with physical skills. Natalia deserves to be Black Widow, and she can faintly beat Thor in half a move. Perhaps on Earth, only Captain America, who has just been unearthed and has not yet awakened, can be above her. If I had known earlier, Thor had 1,500 years of combat experience. And at this time in Asgard, something big happened. 10 years ago, an injury in Jotunheim caused Loki to doubt his identity, but he has always refused to think in the least desirable direction. Jane Foster held up Mjolnir the other day, and Odin's shock made him understand that even in exile, Odin had his eyes on Thor. He finally found an opportunity to get close to the ice gate in the treasure house, and with the help of the power of the ice gate, he understood his own life experience. Why? You caused the carnage in Jotunheim and brought me back. Why? Loki was excited like never before. Even if Thor beat him up twice in 3 days, it didn't bring him such a big excitement. Odin let out a long sigh. Because you are an innocent child. No. There must be another reason for you to bring me back, tell me, said at the end, already roaring. Loki didn't believe it at all. Maybe there was a reason for this, but at most it allowed Odin to let him go, and he wouldn't bring him back to Asgard as a prince. Odin knew he couldn't hide it, so he had to tell the truth. I hope that one day our two kingdoms will become one and bring about a union. Through you, a permanent peace will be formed. The truth often hurts you more than lies. Loki's face twisted. Then why didn't you tell me all this earlier? Odin said helplessly. I hide the truth to protect you. Because I am a scary monster that runs out at night. I finally understand why you have been partial to Thor all these years, because I have always been just a tool, and you will not let an ice giant sit on the throne. Loki has never lost his composure like he did today. As a result of the dispute, Odin fell into a coma and entered Odin's sleep prematurely. Loki took over King Nur and temporarily ruled the domain of God. he decides to do something big and really prove himself to Odin. Stop fighting. Every time you lose, you will come back at night to take revenge. I have never seen such a stingy man. Natalia put Thor down, and then sat on a recliner and complained. Miss Gien, who was contacting Thunder Control, froze suddenly, and cursed secretly, "Scumbag. By the way, the director arranged for me to go to Stark Industries, your eldest nephew's place, to inquire about intelligence and make an assessment of his ability and character. But I think it might be more useful to ask you directly." Natasha Romanoff spoke suddenly. Thor's eyes froze. Is this the beginning of Iron Man 2's plot? In other words, Tony should have suffered from palladium poisoning during this period of time, and began to live a life of drunken dreams like before. The military is also trying to get Tony's armor technology. After all, Thor's ability comes from himself, and the armor that can be worn on the body seems to be more useful. At present, his strength should be slightly inferior to yours. Because of the magic bracelet I gave her at the beginning, Natalia's strength is much higher than in the original book. However, the improvement of Tony Stark's strength is gradual, and his armor will continue to be updated and iterated. In the future war that will destroy 3.5 billion people, he will be an important member. If this war ends, if he fails, he will be the last hope for a comeback. Thor spoke highly of Stark, which surprised Natalia. As for character, you can even trust him as Captain America in a righteous way. Usually, except for being a bit cheap, everything else is okay. Thor curled his lips. Natalia jotted down some key words. Then he blinked and asked, "If possible, I actually want to make an assessment of you. Will you always stand by my side? What about your real strength?" Thor froze for a moment, and asked, "Is it the braised egg that wants to know, or do you want to know?" "Me," Natalia said with a smile like a flower, "you know me well. I can't know almost everything about you, right?" Thor pondered for a moment, then said, "The first question, if it refers to you, yes. If it is S.H.I.E.L.D., no S.H.I.E.L.D. has been corrupted a long time ago, and you should know it. I arrested Zola with my own hands. But then the government decided to absorb him into S.H.I.E.L.D. This is a bomb that will sooner or later dismantle S.H.I.E.L.D. from within." Natalia was about to speak, but Thor covered her mouth. "Don't ask, it's useless to ask. Asking questions now will not only fail to solve the problem, but will scare the snake. The second question is my strength. As far as I am concerned, if I go all out and try my best, I can resist all the nuclear bombs in the world and sink any fleet within a quarter of an hour. At present, there are more than I only have 2 women, one is sealed and the other is sealed. Unless the human race is extinct, she will not make a move most of the time." Natalia's eyes widened. Although the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. knew that Thor was very powerful, they didn't expect to be so strong. No wonder he doesn't care about those politicians who try to supervise him. If this news gets out, it may cause a major earthquake in Washington. While he was thinking, there was a huge amount of roaring sound suddenly, and a beam of colorful light descended from the sky, almost connecting the sky and the earth. The light lasted for several breaths before disappearing. Miss Jane suddenly rushed over with an instrument, and shouted excitedly, Hey, there is a situation. I just detected that there are violent spatial fluctuations in the suburbs. According to my speculation, it is very likely that the legendary Bifrost opened already. These days, she has read a lot of Asgard's tomes and learned a lot of new knowledge. Although she has decided to become a superhero, she has not given up on her original dream." Soon, Natalia's communication equipment rang. She listened to the report, looked up to Thor and said, "There is an agent report. There are a few strangely dressed guys in the suburbs, a bit like Wonder Woman, Chang Long and Robin Han. They must have come to look for you, right?" The moment Thor saw Bifrost, he guessed their identities, and there was only one reason why they came to Earth on purpose. He sighed in a low voice. Loki, you're playing tricks again. A few of his companions have arrived, and Loki will soon send the destroyer armor to hunt him down. His current power has not been sealed, so Loki's main purpose should be to drag himself to the Earth to carry out his plan. Thor, who is familiar with the original book, knows that on the surface Loki betrayed Asgard and led the wolf into the house. In fact, Loki's real purpose is not to kill Odin, but to use this layout to kill Lof and prove himself to Odin. Lof should have died a long time ago, and Thor didn't intend to stop him, so let's play with him. S.H.I.E.L.D. was very efficient and brought in several guests in no time. Sif, Nebula, Minerva. You are all here. After a long time no see, Thor went up to hug each other. Oh, hell, let me tell you, Thor has changed. He is no longer the Thor who believes that a real man should be a man. Fandral yelled. The most important thing in his eyes before was we brothers, hug us first every time. Thor laughed loudly, and patted him on the shoulder fiercely. Who said that the most important thing in the past was the brother? It's obviously the hammer. The three warriors glanced at Thor, who was empty-handed, then looked around, and then found the hammer that Miss Jane was holding, and their eyeballs were about to pop out. Wow! You're willing to give away such a precious hammer to a girl? Fandral exclaimed. You even wore women's clothing for the hammer. F*K. The girls discovered a new world, they laughed, and Thor was furious. Sif, beat him. This is a dark history of Thor, it's hard to explain in one word. Don't mention it. Next, some of his companions told him about Loki's plot. As for Nebula and Minerva, they obviously planned to stay on Earth. And their arrival obviously cannot be hidden from Loki, and soon Loki will send the destroyer armor. Thor naturally didn't want the aftermath of the battle to destroy the manor. He took Jane Foster with him and took the initiative to go to an open space in the suburbs, where Bifrost appeared just now. In the vast wilderness, a huge amount of tornado storm took shape in a few seconds, and a 3-meter-high armor with a metallic luster all over its body slowly walked out. Destroyer armor. In the command headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the military, a large number of screens played the pictures taken by drones. The destroyer raised his head and looked around. In the dark hole in the visor, a crimson light shot towards every corner of the sky like a volcanic eruption, accompanied by the sound of an explosion. The picture on the screen was only red in one moment, and turned into snowflake white in the next moment. Report. All drones near the target are destroyed. Report. Satellite lost contact. F*K. Nick Fury slapped the table. In the distance, Thor was not surprised to see the destroyer armor clearing the field in an instant. To do something bad and dismantle the monitoring beforehand, Loki can't think of anything he can think of. In fact, it is not difficult for him to defeat it. Loki has not obtained full authority, and its strength can be easily solved by himself in the original history, let alone now. Sif, Nebula, and the three warriors drew their weapons. Natalia lit up the widow's sting, and Minerva pulled out a sniper rifle. Thor turned his head and looked at Jane Foster, whose eyes widened before he could react. It is your first assessment target. Cooperate with your teammates and destroy any piece of its armor to pass the test. After so many days of guidance, Miss Jien's strength is actually very good, but she lacks actual combat experience. The destroyer armor in front of him is a good target. And with myself watching from the sidelines, plus the role of extremis, I don't worry about accidents. Me? Miss Jien was taken aback for a moment, then her expression slowly became firm. Without Thor's shot, Jane Foster walked forward with Mjolnir. The mentally handicapped behavior of holding back and not magnifying the move will definitely not happen to Loki. After simply accumulating power, a golden flame spewed out towards everyone. Be careful. Natalia yelled, and was the first to rush out, crossing her hands to block the front, and the magic bracelet blocked the flames. Sif shouted, "Cover me!" Fandral and others, who had cooperated tacitly for a long time, jumped up immediately. The destroyer swung Fandral flying with one hand, and at the same time Sif jumped on its back and thrust his sword hard into its neck. The flames on the destroyer were instantly extinguished, and the movement also came to a standstill. So easy. Everyone was surprised. Only Thor understands that the destroyer is not a human being, and there is no such thing as a critical point, and there is nothing wrong with this sword. Sure enough, the destroyer armor began to flip, and the Sif, which was originally hanging on the back, faced it in an instant. Sif was shocked and was about to jump off when a steel thug grabbed her in the air. If this one is caught, I am afraid that it will immediately severely damage the powerful combat power of this scene, which is second only to Thor. Sif couldn't dodge in the air, she closed her eyes in despair. Bang. A gunshot sounded, and Minerva hit the destroyer armor's hand with a shot. Although the shot didn't cause any damage, it missed her hand halfway and passed Sif's side. Sharp. Thor couldn't help applauding in his heart, he was ready to shoot just now. Sif, who survived the catastrophe, fell to the ground and gasped for breath. Minerva's forehead was covered with cold sweat, and she was under a lot of pressure from this shot. At this moment, a thin figure leapt up from a roof, and the flashing light of the hammer in his hand slammed into the destroyer's head fiercely. There was a loud noise, and the destroyer staggered, but recovered in an instant, and slapped it hard with one hand, as if slapping a mosquito. Before Jane could react, she was photographed heavily, and she flew several hundred meters away. If it weren't for the physical strengthening brought by Mjolnir, this one would have killed her. The empty eye sockets of the destroyer armor lit up again, and the fiery light was about to shoot out again. Sif rushed out again, and made a sliding shovel towards the destroyer's crotch. Definitely not sliding upwards, because she knew that the destroyer had no vitals. She slashed towards a leg with the speed of the charge. The sound of metal colliding reminded me that the double-edged sword that had slashed countless enemies had slashed on the destroyer's leg, except for sparks, not even a scratch. Although it didn't cause any damage, it lost its balance and fell sideways. The destructive rays drew a gully several kilometers long on the ground and shot into the sky. While it was falling, everyone rushed to it, and the sound of clanging and clanging could be heard endlessly. What should I do? This thing won't break, Fandral yelled, turning in Thor's direction. It is said that many bosses don't like to fight in person, they like to stand behind, first send horses to give experience and equipment, and then be killed by glory. But this kind of brainless creature is often written the boss is read as an experience pack. Wow. Since when did His Royal Highness learn this trick? Get out of the way. A sound of reprimand stunned everyone, and the random destroyer rolled and threw them away, and was about to get up again. Not far away, Jane Foster raised a hammer in one hand, thunder flashed all over the sky, and dark cloud shrouded it, as if covering all the light. The ground began to shake, and a thunderbolt several meters wide fell from the sky, dividing the sky and the earth into two halves, and rushed into her body along with the high-raised hammer. The silhouette of a woman's armor very similar to Thor's armor appeared from the void and slowly covered her body. Although it was not a real body, it made the originally slim figure a little more dignified. Not far away, Thor held his breath and stared at this scene. This scene originally took at least half a year in his plan. Countless thick lightnings illuminated the sky that was originally covered by dark clouds. Jane Foster swung the hammer forward violently, and the huge amounts of lightning slammed heavily on the destroyer armor. Kacha kacha. The mournful sound of the metal unable to withstand the high pressure came to mind. The corner of Loki's mouth in Asgard was twitching. He already understood that in Thor's eyes, his pursuit was an exercise for his little girlfriend. Unwilling to admit defeat, he drove the destroyer in an attempt to launch even more terrifying attacks. I can't cure Thor and I can't cure you. In the helmet of the destroyer, golden light kept flashing, and terrifying energy was accumulating. Jane Foster suddenly charged forward, rushing in front of the destroyer at a speed that broke through the limit of mortals. Mjolnir slammed hard on the destroyer's visor that was about to spray rays. This hammer mixed with divine power not only shattered the visor, but also blocked the golden rays in the head of the destroyer. With a muffled sound, the entire destroyer twitched violently. Just when everyone thought they had won, the destroyer's head suddenly exploded violently. Not good. Miss Jien, who was caught off guard, was blown out on the spot. Mjolnir came out. The outline of the armor on his body gradually faded and disappeared, and the thunder and lightning around him gradually dissipated. In midair, Jane, who was in a daze, suddenly felt that she was caught. When he opened his eyes, he saw Thor's approving eyes. You've done a good job, leave it to me. Miss Jien gave a faint and then a burst of exhaustion flooded her body, and she fell into a coma. The destroyer, who had lost his head, stood up again with his empty neck and walked towards the crowd. Thor signaled the crowd to disperse, and walked forward alone. My stupid little brother, why do you always forget to eat but not fight? Isn't it good to be a happy little princess? Shit. Loki, who was far away in Asgard, exploded in anger after a long absence. The miserable life of being beaten twice in 5 years and 3 days seemed to emerge before his eyes. He drove the destroyer in anger, and punched Thor. A huge impact sounded like an ordinary plane crashing, and Thor tightly caught the destroyer's fist with both hands. Twisted hard, and there was a sound of metal tearing, and one arm of the destroyer armor was cracked and shattered. Your Highness, he seems to be getting stronger and stronger, the 3 warriors murmured. So Thor is the boss, you can only call 666. Sif complained. She felt a little uncomfortable about this. She chose to become a warrior in the first place, just to please Thor. Later, she finally became the most powerful female warrior in Asgard, and even the 3rd strongest after Odin and Thor, so she became Thor's good buddy. It was not easy for Thor to become enlightened a few years ago, but she still did not give up her persistence for thousands of years. She was trying to reduce the direct gap between her and Thor. But now it seems that the gap seems to be even bigger. Taking a peek at the unconscious Miss Jien, the resentment was even worse. The suit of armor just now, but a couple pretending to say. A few months ago, the scene where the Gundam was torn apart was repeated. The resistance of the destroyer armor was futile. Thor didn't even use the power of thunder, and defeated it with his physical strength alone. In just a short while, the majestic destroyer just now became scrap iron all over the place. Loki in Asgard was already scared to pee. He didn't care about the destroyer armor, and ran in the direction of Bifrost. While Thor was still pretending, he had to hurry up and start the next plan. Beside Heimdall, who was frozen by Loki with the ice gate, several blue figures appeared. Looking at this resplendent world, they felt unprecedented excitement in their hearts. Thousands of years of hatred will end today. Loki greeted him with a smile on his face. Welcome to Asgard. Nice to meet again, Captain Black. I'm Phil Coulson, SHIELD agent. I'm your biggest fan. Stop. Thor interrupted his approach. I remember that your idol is obviously Steve. How did you become a fan? If you have anything to say, just tell me, I'm in a hurry. A trace of embarrassment flashed across Agent Phil Coulson's face, and he smiled and said, although this battle avoided residential areas, it caused great damage to the surrounding environment after all, and the entire New York has seen the vision here. So, SHIELD hopes that there needs to be an explanation to the higher-ups, at least to make Washington believe in the existence of aliens. Thor shook his head. They will believe it, and it doesn't matter if they don't believe it. It won't be long before the whole world knows the existence of aliens. After finishing speaking, he ignored the bewildered Phil Coulson and turned to look at Natalia and the others. Are you going back? Natalia was a little bit reluctant. The main reason is that Thor often disappears from time to time, and it can be several years at a time. Thor patted her on the shoulder, with a serious expression on his face. My younger brother is causing trouble again, and the father is asleep. Only I can take charge of the overall situation. I have to go back and deal with him. Don't worry, I will be back soon. This time it won't be that long. Going back this time is to quell the disaster caused by Loki, so he left Nebula and Minerva on the Earth, and only brought the 3 warriors of Sif and Asgard. He yelled into the sky, Heimdall, take us back. As the god of Door of Asgard and Asgardian of Bifrost, Heimdall's strength is beyond doubt. Hearing the call, he shattered the ice with all his strength, hacked the surrounding giants of Jotunheim to death with a few strokes, and inserted the guardian sword into the switch of Bifrost. The brilliance of Bifrost poured down, and the tolls disappeared in the brilliant halo. In Asgard, in Odin's palace, Odin was lying unconscious on the bed, and Frigg was waiting beside him. There was a noisy sound outside, and Frigga immediately became alert, and she drew out her long sword, watching vigilantly towards the gate slowly covered by frost. Although she is actually a necromancer, she also has good swordsmanship. The gate of the palace was kicked open with a bang, and a tall dark blue figure appeared. Giants of Jotunheim. Frigga's eyes widened. How could this Jotunheim race infiltrate here? She bravely went up to meet the giants of Jotunheim, who came in with a sword, that was sent flying by Lof's paw from behind and fell to the ground. As the queen of Asgard, she is not a real warrior after all. How can she be the opponent of King Giants of Jotunheim? Lof ignored her. He looked at Odin on the bed. A smile appeared on his ugly face. Finally, the battle between Asgard and Jotunheim is over, with the destruction of Asgard ending. It is said that you can still see and hear things around you in this state. I hope this is true. Then you will know that it was the king of the giants of Jotunheim, Lof, who killed you. He raised the ice pick in his hand, about to pierce it. A golden light pierced through him in an instant, causing him to fall heavily to the ground. Horrified, he turned his head and looked at Loki, who held Kunganir in his hand. Kunganil released a more intense light again, and the moment Lof's body was torn apart, he heard the last sound. You will also know that it was Odin's son, Loki, who killed you.